You're already a skilled crocheter, so why does amigurumi feel like it's a totally different craft? The secret is it's not harder, it's just misunderstood. Most crocheters hit a wall with amigurumi not because they lack the skills, but because we're trained to think in rows and panels rather than curves and shapes. Nobody tells you that it's a sculptural process, so it looks complicated, maybe even childish or way too precise. Today, we're going to tear that nonsense down. We're busting myths. We are exposing the real problems. I'm going to show you how to take what you already know and turn it into something 3D. But before we dive in, if we haven't met yet, my name is Marty. I am an amigurumi designer, and I am a firm believer that crochet is a sculptural art. It's not a set of rigid rules. Around here, we learn how to bend the rules and flip the script, and we have a damn good time while we're doing it. So let's kick it off. Now, a lot of crocheters like me freeze before they ever even get started with amigurumi. And it's not because they're not skilled. It's because it looks overwhelming. There's tiny stitches, unfamiliar shapes, patterns that read like a totally secret language. And if your first try looks a little off, it makes you feel like you have already failed. But this isn't about failure. It's about fear. And that is where we're going to start. Here's the thing. If you can single crochet and you can increase and you can decrease, you're already ahead of the game. You're already most of the way there. Amigurumi isn't about complex techniques. Honestly, it's just shaping yarn in 3D. You're sculpting form with the stitches. So let's just be real. The single crochet is not what scares a lot of people off. It's all of the stuff that sneaks around it. It's the stuffing and the sewing and the patterns, like I said, that read like a secret crochet language, right? It feels complicated because nobody ever breaks it down. Let's do that now. Let's talk about stuffing first, because there's a big misconception that stuffing is what shapes the amigurumi, and that couldn't be further from the truth. The reality is the stitch placement and the tension is what actually creates that shape. Stuffing is kind of the supporting actor, right? It can only enhance what's already there. So depending on how much you stuff really is going to determine whether it's right or wrong. And I don't even want to say right or wrong, because there is no right or wrong. It's all about the vibe that you're going for. We're going to dig into that in the next video. But once you get your basic structure, you shape as you go. It's sculpting. It's not surgery. So don't worry about the stuffing. It, again, does not have anything to do with shaping the amigurumi. It's just filling in the form that you create with the stitches. All right, so when it comes to sewing, the misconception is that your sewing has to be perfect, and that could not be further from the truth. The fact is, sewing is just another aspect of shaping your project. So if you stop thinking about it as it's the be-all, end-all for your project and start thinking of it more in terms of, okay, this is another chance for me to make this look the way that I want it to look. There's no hardcore rules. If you shift the placement of the pieces that you're working with, it's going to give the whole amigurumi a completely different vibe. So my tips for sewing are to pin where you want your things to go. Use a lot of straight pins. I use them all the time, and they are phenomenal. They help me make sure that as I'm looking at my piece, they are in all views exactly where they need to be so that it's sturdy and looks the way that you want it to look. Then you can go into sewing it or leaving it like that. It's fine. Anyway, but start small. Just pre-shape it. So make sure you're sewing in good light and make sure your symmetry is the way that you want it. So let's talk about complex patterns. There's a myth that patterns are hard to read and hard to follow. And I say that's more of a misconception than it is a myth, because the reality is you already know how to read patterns. You read patterns all the time when you're making your wearables or blankets. You already know the stitches, you know the abbreviations, and it's really no different in that aspect. The main difference comes from the way that the patterns are written, because most wearables, blankets, you've got several rows that are the same. Whereas with amigurumi, a lot of times every single row changes. The stitch count might stay the same, but you might have increases on this side and decreases on this side. So the shaping is different. Break it down if you need to. I find it really nice, especially when I'm trying to understand a concept like shaping and trying to figure out what these people are doing. Stitch markers, like, they're literally my best friend. I will go through and, for instance, here, don't pay attention because it's ugly. It's fine. We're fine. So I will put a stitch marker wherever it says increase and another stitch marker wherever it says decrease, so that I can physically see what the designer is trying to accomplish with these stitches. When I first started, that was one of the things that really helped me understand the shaping process. Again, next week, we're going to go into depth about shaping and how it works and what to look for so that you can begin to identify these things in patterns as well. Now that we've untangled what's actually making the amigurumi feel overwhelming, let's flip the script, because a few small tools and mindset shifts make a massive, massive difference. So let's talk about some tools that make it feel doable. I talked a little bit about stitch markers, game changer. Okay, these are going to be your very best friend. Start with a sphere, one shape, one win, just a little tiny sphere. That's it. This is what starts almost all amigurumi. It's only 3 shapes. So let's start with this one. I'm actually going to include a small sphere pattern in the description below so that you can get started today. It doesn't have to be perfect. It really doesn't. It's never going to be perfect. Amigurumi in its core is not going to be perfect. Just explore. Let your creativity win. Practice in yarn that you can see and that you can feel clearly. I personally like using worsted weight acrylic yarn, but I've also used cotton. I've used big bulky yarns like this, that are more soft. It really depends on the look that you want to go for. Now that you know it's not some impossible skill level thing, the next lie waiting around the corner is this. If I don't want to make adorable little animals, why should I even bother? All right. Myth number 2 is amigurumi is always cute. Well, the fact is it's not for everybody. The reason that this myth exists is because online, for some reason, you see a plethora of pastel plushies, kawaii faces, rainbow cupcakes, and all of these cutesy little things. And while toys for kids are great, it's not appealing to everybody. I'm one of those not everybody kind of people, Gen X with an edge. It's fine. We're fine. Amigurumi is a technique, not a style. It's not an aesthetic. It's an actual technique. You're crocheting in 3D shapes. That's it. That's it. What you turn it into, that's entirely up to you, boo. Entirely up to you. Cute is one option, but it's not the rule. So you can go creepy, elegant, realistic, which I actually like, abstract, gritty, surreal, funny, weird, artistic, emotional, like the list goes on and on. You can do whatever your mind can conceive. You got this. You have full control over the look and feel. So let's break down 4 areas where small intentional choices can completely flip the aesthetic of your project. The first thing I want to talk about is color. Change the color story. So pastels usually they lean more towards the cutesy stuff. Neutrals give it a more modern feel. Jewel tones are kind of moody, and high contrast colors give it like an edgy feel. That's one really, really good way to change the whole vibe of your project without doing anything major. Another thing is to rethink the facial features. You can do a project with 0 facial features at all. If you want, let me give you a for instance. If this little sweet little guy right here, he's got eyes. What if instead of eyes, it was just an embroidered X? The whole feel would be different. If it was just a straight line, the whole vibe would be different. So you can think about doing no face at all, or embroidered, realism, stylized features. You can do off-center expressions or abstract placements of various things depending on the aesthetic, style, vibe that you're looking for, that that speaks to your soul. That's really what you're going for. Another thing that you can do is embrace texture and detail. So you can do surface crochet, embroidery, bobbles, rough stitches. This is where you experiment. I'd say 95% of amigurumi is done with single crochet stitches. However, there is no reason you can't throw in a bobble somewhere. A lot of people do it for toes, or I've seen toes be done with trebles and slip stitches in the same. Like, the options are unlimited. So build complexity through tactile elements, not just shape. And you can also reference outside of your normal sources. So take inspiration from art, nature, mythology, vintage toys. That's a good one. Y'all, if you have ever watched Elise Rose crochet, her designs have they are cutesy, but they're cutesy in a very nostalgic way. It's not the kawaii cute with the, far placed eyes and the scrunched up faces and the always happy smiles and the, blanket yarn. It's not that. Her designs have a very nostalgic feel to them, which I absolutely love. And you can also use personal stories. Explore other designers like Elise Crochet. There's also another one is Complicated Knots. Her designs are phenomenal. She does make little animals. She makes cryptids. She does all kinds of stuff. So you can check her out as well. But they're pushing the medium. They're not just the cutesy little teddy bears and whales and super simple no-sew stuff. The thing is, you don't have to make what doesn't feel like you, right? Your vibe belongs in amigurumi, even if it's weird or dark or gritty or totally unclassifiable. If you want to do something more retro, girl, get that. Do it. You got this. You don't have to crochet cute. You just have to crochet like you. And speaking of doing things your way, let's talk about patterns. Because if you have ever felt like deviating from a pattern was a moral crime, you've been lied to. So many crocheters treat patterns like sacred scripture. They don't deviate. A lot of times there's a fear of messing up, of wasting your time or your materials. And some people believe that modifying a pattern is disrespectful to the designer. That's simply not true. The result is creative paralysis. No tweaks, no exploration. You are living inside of a box. The truth is, patterns are tools. They're not law. A pattern is a map. It's not a mandate. You're not a crochet robot. You're a maker. Real growth happens when you start questioning the pattern and tweaking it to fit your own personal style. You don't need to overhaul the whole design. You just need to tweak a few things and watch the creativity unfold. Let's talk about 4 ways to do that without actually destroying the designer's pattern. You can adjust the scale. So for instance, let's take our royal rhino, for instance, okay? If you used a bigger hook and a bigger yarn, you would have a larger project. You would have a much bigger rhino. Now, there's a couple of ways to do that. You can use bigger yarn, meaning a bulky yarn or a jumbo yarn. A lot of those are super fuzzy. Might not be what you're looking for a rhino, but if you hold 2 or 3 strands of worsted weight together, you're going to get the same effect without the fuzz. Larger hook, larger yarn equals a larger project. If you use a smaller tool, like a smaller hook and smaller yarn, you're going to get micro details. So, for instance, with this pattern here, if you were to use a DK weight, because this one is made with worsted weight, if you were to jump down a hook size, go with DK weight, you're going to get a much smaller project, but the details are also going to show up more. Do you see what I'm saying? Like these ridges along his back, they're going to show up more. So you're definitely allowed to scale up and down, and that doesn't deviate from the actual pattern. The stitches are going to remain the same. You're just going to make it bigger or smaller depending on what you would like to do with that pattern. Another thing you can think about is changing the details. So your eye placement, your ear placement, facial features, accessories, things like that. You can add scars. That would be a great one with this pattern if you added little scars to him, hair, textures, those kind of things. You want to throw on a sweater, then that changes the whole vibe of the rhino as well. The thing is to make it personal. So you can also mix them up. You don't need to just stay with one. You can take parts of one pattern and parts of another and combine them, or even more than that, to combine into something completely and totally new. I love doing that because once you understand the shapes that are in every single amigurumi and how everything works and how things are created, you can mix and match and you can create your own amazing projects just like that. So once you get the structure, you are free to experiment. I am going to challenge you to look over some crochet patterns. There are a ton of crochet patterns that are free, amigurumi patterns. Look at them and analyze them so that you can kind of start seeing how things work out. And we're going to delve again into that more next week. So modifying a pattern does not disrespect the designer. It makes the project, not the pattern, it makes the project yours. Every tweak is a lesson. Every time you make a change, you become more confident in your creative expression, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. You're building creative fluency. You're not just following instructions. So you don't need permission to make it your own. You don't. You're already an artist, already. So if you've been avoiding amigurumi because it looks too complicated, too cute, too fiddly, now you know better. The truth is, you already have the skills. You've been sculpting with stitches all along, you just didn't realize it. And amigurumi isn't about perfection. It's about curiosity. It's about play. It's about giving yarn a shape, a voice, a story. And I don't want you to leave this video just feeling inspired, okay? I want you to actually start. That's why I made that free pattern that I spoke about earlier. It's just a simple sphere. It is nothing major, but I have linked it in the description below. It's a micro pattern that you can grab right now and get started today, because this is the shape that literally starts everything. So there's going to be space for your notes, thoughts, maybe some customizations, because you don't need permission to make it your own. So have fun with it. And if you're still nervous about stuffing or sewing or shaping, I got you. I got you. We're going to cover that next week. I'm going to show you exactly how shaping works. You're going to learn the 3 core shapes that make up every amigurumi. And I'm going to show you how to sculpt with just your hook and some simple increases, decreases, and sewing. That's it. It's not magic. It's just yarn. And once you see it in action, it's gonna click. So go grab that pattern, give it a try, and I will see you in the next video where we start turning your stitches into sculptures. You got this. You got this.